Hello, everybody. This is Mike here, and we're running just a minute behind. That is my fault. I'm a hot mess sometimes. Most of the time. Let's be honest. Most of the time. Don't forget, check out. Dorian, this is going to be a rough night. PredatorTools.com. They make the finest digging tools. Only tools that I use. Each one is heat treated. Individually by George Lesh. Amazing tools. I don't have their phone number in front of me. Give them a call though. Ask for Pam. Pam usually answers the phone. That's George's wife. And tell them we sent you. They promise you you'll be happy. They make the best shovels and digging tools, hand digging tools you ever could use. So I'm going to be back in Ohio this fall, probably most of the fall, and I don't know yet what's going to be going on. I don't know if we'll have a show. Dennis is out for a while. He's got business for the next several weeks, correct, Dorian?
Right.
So I don't know if there's going to be a pause in the show or what we're going to do. Of course, I've spoke to the ladies, and they're going to keep up Monday nights. Hopefully, by the time I'm in Ohio, and I might be able to still do the show. I don't know, but if not, we might have to take a pause on Tuesday night. Friday nights are done for a while, and I apologize. Life has been busy and crazy. I got sick again. Just a lot going on, but I've really missed doing the podcast, and I'm glad to be back tonight, although I'm going to be on mostly tuning in with you all while Mr. Cook does episode 5, correct? We're on 5, right?
Yep. That's right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It looks like it's going to take one or two more parts after this one to finish up.
All right. But and Dorian, I know I said something, but I want to say on air, we really appreciate everybody reaching out and giving us feedback. I have been getting emails and messages and everything through social media and YouTube about how much everybody's enjoying Dorian doing this series. And so I think our plan right now, when we get back to normal, is do series as he's, it's a lot of work for Dorian, and when he's up for it and ready for one, we're gonna do a series on different things. I told him I'd love to talk about Revolutionary War, War of 1812, French and Indian, all that, and he got pretty excited. So I think we'll do those. We'll probably do one, wrap it up, and then do a few shows, let him get caught up, let him take a break, and we'll just do one of our normal shows. But everybody has been reaching out to me. Thank Dorian. Tell Dorian great shows. It's been going really good. So thank you all for that feedback. And I had somebody in chat I believe it was in the All Metal Mode forum, which if you haven't joined, go to allmetalmode.com and go out to go to navigation and forums, sign up. We'd love to have you. Somebody was talking about you, Dorian, and thank Dorian for me. Or hey, they were reaching out to you directly. They thought you were on the forum.
Oh,
and
well, it's not that I don't want to be on the forum. It's just the time it's taking to put these episodes together.
Yes,
it's not left me a lot of time to be on the forum.
I'm not giving you any hard time or anything. Okay. I understand. But I said Dorian isn't here yet on the forum, but I will tell him. And they come back and said something like, "Oh, and you do a great job too, and so does Gypsy and Amanda." And I said, "Hey, no apology necessary. Dorian's shows are my favorite as well when he does those, so no apology needed." And we kind of got a laugh out of that. But we appreciate feedback, and if you guys have ideas for shows, topics, guests, You can always reach out to me for that as well. Again, don't forget to check out allmetalmode.com. I've got a few articles that'll be going out soon. Dirtdigest.com. Make sure you check that out. That comes out the first of every month. And of course, Dorian has the Old Pros Corner in there, and the back of the magazine each month is a chapter out of a book he wrote on Morgan's raids through. Is it all through Ohio?
Actually, Mike, it was primarily Kentucky, some in Indiana, and then some in Ohio.
Yep. Okay. So yeah,
But
it's
Kentucky was his favorite target area.
okay.
Because Kentucky was a border state, and he was trying to influence Kentucky to go Confederate. It was kind of in the middle. Had large numbers of people that were loyal to both the North and the South. So that's why he operated here so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's get to it, Dorian.
Okay, are we ready?
Oh well, one other thing. There is a lot going on, and there might be a pause in the show and stuff, but we're going to get this series done. Unless there's technical issues or something like that, we're going to every week until this is done, and then we might have to take a break or something like that. But we're going to get this done, and hopefully we'll just keep right on going, but we'll have to see how things go. Go ahead, Dorian.
Okay. Well, the research has been going really well, and I got some surprises. I turned up photographs and information that I did not even know existed that I've added tonight. You'll see some of those photographs, those of you that are following along. If you're not on All Metal Mode group page, we have supplemental photos. There is approximately 30 photos that are numbered, and I will be referring to these photos by numbers as we go through the story of Quantrill and his raiders.
And Dorian's talking about the All Metal Mode Facebook group pages where he has pictures. Do you have them posted on We Dig the Civil War?
No, all I do is post the notice that we're going to be doing the podcast.
Okay, go ahead.
Because most of the guys like to jump over and just follow along on your page.
Okay, super.
All righty. Are we ready?
Yes,
okay,
sir,
Mike.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go. All right, everybody mount up. We're going to ride hard here. If you'll recall, at the end of part 4, we covered what was called, what official history is called the Lawrence Massacre. Now, I want to remind everybody, because we're going to be dealing with the consequences of the Lawrence Massacre. And it is quite a historical lesson to see what happened after Quantrill's raid on Lawrence. But I wanted to remind everybody that in the spring of 1863, Quantrill had issued a proclamation sent out by messengers to the federal forces of Kansas. So they had no excuse. They can't say, well, you never told us, you didn't warn us. And after the jail collapse that had killed Bill Anderson's sister, the guy who became Bloody Bill, we'll be talking a lot more about him tonight. There was a 3-month spree of the Jayhawkers that were robbing and looting and killing old men and women and burning the homes of anybody they remotely thought was loyal to the South. And sometimes they didn't make too much difference. They burned the homes of people loyal to the North, as we saw in the last part when they murdered Cole Younger's father. But the point is, Quantrill told them, he said that if they did not stop burning and robbing houses, killing old men and women, he would in return come to their headquarters city, Lawrence, at some unexpected time and paint the city blacker than Hades, which that means, of course, with fire. Fire leaves ruins that are black, and make its streets run with blood. He warned them fairly. Is this is this what a sneaking, no morals, cold-blooded murderer would do? Stop and think here, people. He was trying to get them to stop their crimes against non-combatants. And nothing else was working. So he sends them fair warning. And what did they do? They laughed at it. They mocked. They thought so little of Quantrill's threat that they did not beef up their security. They did not bring in veteran troops, hardened fighters and things to protect the city. They had a chance to do that. They chose not to. So they did not stop the robbing and burning and killing. So ask yourself, was Quantrill just doing a random act of violence, or did he have a righteous purpose? See, guerrillas are painted as bloodthirsty people that just love killing. And yet, when they went to Lawrence, they killed the men and not the women and children. It is recorded in history, beyond just what Quantrill's men wrote, that they did not kill any women and children in Lawrence. So keep that in mind now, and let's see what happened after Quantrill returned to Missouri. 2 days after he got back, we're starting chapter 16 in our book about Tro here. And this one's entitled Order Number 11, August 1863. 2 days after they got back to Missouri safely, Quantrill disbanded the guerrillas again. Fully 6,000 Federals were on his trail. The savageness of the blow struck there had appalled and infuriated the country. Now, what had not appalled and infuriated the country was all of the brutal murders of the old men and women and the burning of their houses and the robbing and the wholesale robbing and looting. They didn't seem to be much upset by that. I mean, after all, it wasn't happening in their neighborhood. But Quantrill does something in the way of retribution to point out to them, if you keep doing this, there's going to be penalties. Quantrill wasn't asking for anything for him or his men. He wasn't asking for considerations. He was just telling them, if you don't stop this, here are the consequences. And they laughed at him. And he did exactly what he said he was going to do. Now, I don't know about you, but I like a man or a woman that does exactly what they say they're going to do. I tend to have confidence in a person like that. All right, now, he's got 6,000 Federal troops on his track, and the newspapers went to work. It says the journalistic pulse of the North rose to fever heat and beat as though its raging fever there had been added raving insanity. That's kind of interesting. I hear more and more people talking about all the crazy things that are happening in our world today, our country today, that things seem to be, on the point of being insanity, some of the things that are being done. He says, in the delirium of the governing powers, impossible things were demanded. Quantrill was to be hunted to the death. He was to be hanged, drawn, and quartered. His band was to be annihilated, and he was to be fought with fire, persecution, depopulation, and wholesale destruction because of his efforts to stop a major pandemic of crime. That's what it was, plain and simple. Crime carried out under the guise, the facade of military operations. These were atrocities. We've had men in our armies hung and shot for far less than these federal militia soldiers did in Missouri. Now, I'd like you to go to picture number 1 if you're following along, please. Picture number 1, you see the front page of the Lawrence Journal-World, dated August the 21st, 1863. Lawrence destroyed by Quantrill's guerrillas. Horrible atrocities. Entire downtown in flames. The pursuit of the demons. Cowardly attackers retreat towards Missouri. As we plainly saw, there wasn't anything cowardly about these men. It is absolutely a disgusting disservice that they should have been called cowardly. I would say Jim Lane, since he ran away from the fight instead of leading his men, leading the troops that were there, if there was any charge of cowardice to be lodged, it ought to be hung right around the neck of Senator Jim Lane. Okay, most of the ruffians got away. General Lane and a party of 20 pursued the guerrillas. No, they didn't. There was a lot more than 20 guerrillas. If I'm reading that right, it looks like, is it 20? Yeah, it is 20. Jim Lane's not about to pursue Quantrill and, men that number in the dozens with just 20 men. That didn't happen. More than 40 guerrillas killed. Hogwash. There wasn't 40 guerrillas killed. But my point is, look at this newspaper. This is 1863, and look at the fake news. Fake news. It's not something that just popped up on the radar screen. This has been associated with American journalism from the day that the first newspaper in the country was published. They are not in the business of promulgating truth, no matter what they say. They are in the business of selling papers. Or in the case of online, now we have online newspapers and so on. They're in the business of getting you to read what they wrote so you'll see what the advertisers have put on their pages. All right. Continuing on here. Let's see what happens at the very height of the very worst of these terrible spasms of false morality, I would call it. Everybody's outraged, but they're outraged at the wrong thing. See, the fact was they needed to clean house on their own side of the street. They needed to prosecute, court-martial, and hang or shoot the militiamen that were robbing and murdering old men and women and children and burning their houses down and stealing all their valuables. That's what needed to happen, but it didn't. What happened was Ewing's famous General Order number 11 was issued. Now, if you'll go to picture 2, please. Picture 2, you see on the left General Thomas Ewing. He is credited as the man who issued Order number 11, and I'll tell you what that is in a moment. But the actual originator was the man on your right, Lieutenant General John Schofield. And if you look at the pictures I've got there, this man would go on to win the Medal of Honor for heroism in battle before the Civil War was over. And guess what? He was the man that recommended that Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, be used as a military base. How interesting! But let me show you what he did with this insidious Order number 11. It required every citizen of Jackson, Cass, Bates, and a portion of Vernon counties to abandon their houses and come either into the lines of designated places that were fortified or within the jurisdiction of said lines. If neither was done, the said citizens remained outside beyond the if the said citizens remained outside beyond the time limit specified for such removal, they were to be regarded as outlaws and punished accordingly. Innocent and guilty alike felt the rigors of this unprecedented proscription. For the Union man, there was the same line of demarcation that was drawn to the secessionist. In other words, he was treated just like the secessionist was if he was in these areas. Age had no immunity, sex was not regarded, the rights of property vanished, predatory bands preyed at will, nothing could be sold, everything had to be abandoned. It was the obliterating of prosperity by counties. It was the depopulation of miles upon miles of fertile territory in a night. This is right here in our own country. And I'll bet most of you listeners never knew this happened. You know, I'm interested in Scottish history because my ancestors came from Scotland. And they had what they called the Highland Clearances. The English, after the famous Battle of Culloden, in which the Highlanders and the Scots were defeated, they issued the same kind of orders, and they cleared out the highlands of Scotland, the mountain areas of all the people there, under penalty of death, and they destroyed and burned their houses. So this is something that, you know, is not strange to other countries, but boy, you know, it was sure strange to the United States until now, till at this time. So can you take a few moments and try to grasp the shock? Some of you live in the country, you don't live in the city. What if you had U.S. soldiers knocking on your door tonight and saying, you know, the president has declared martial law and has issued order number 11, and this county is to be evacuated. You will be taken to a refugee camp until such time as you can make other arrangements for housing in an accepted area, quote unquote. They might do that. You know, I live in the Appalachians, and the Appalachians are full of people who are not going to give up their guns easy, and they might do an Appalachian clearance at some point in history. You know, we study these incredible events in our past history, and I wonder how often we think about the fact that they may become the future incredible events of our future history. We may live through some of these times just like these people did. Anyway, Harrison Trove felt that General Ewing had been unjustly hated and censured by the Southerners and the people who were affected by this order for carrying out the order. And they held him responsible in many ways for its execution. And there was another problem that just added fuel to the fire. There was a captain in the military named George Caleb Bingham, and they, you know, considered him to be a genius painter. And he had been ordered to give infamy to the vandalism of the dead and the voice to the indignation of history over its consummation. Bingham's picture of burning and plundering houses, of a sky made awful with mingling flames and smoke, of a long line of helpless fugitives going away they knew not where, of appealing women and gray-haired non-combatants, of skeleton chimneys rising like wrathful and accusing things from the wreck of pillaged homesteads, of uniformed things called officers rummaging. Of course, this means all Confederate or Southerners, not certainly, you know, all the everybody wearing blue is holy and you know, has a halo around their head here, so to speak. If he painted them into the picture, that's probably the way they would have gone. By the way, let's go to picture number 3. You will see a picture of Captain G.C. Bingham on your left, and This is a plaque in Bates County. It was one of the counties talking about the forced evacuation and burning. I tried to lighten it up so it could be read. But there's a plaque, verifying that the impact. It says the entire population of Bates County was banished. Union soldiers torched homes and towns. Fire consumed the land. Residents became refugees. Regardless of allegiances, hardships inflicted upon civilians were stern and merciless. So the sad thing about it is that Quantrill's attempt to bring relief to these very people actually ended up making their life harder. Now, that is called the law of unintended consequences. Quantrill actually believed that their raid on Lawrence might put enough fear in them to make changes for the better. It did not. They went into a blind rage. Everybody should have had a big sign hanging around his neck saying, "Don't confuse me with the facts." We've got a lot of that going on right now. I'm not going to go off on a political rant, but we've got craziness like, a man can throw two police officers around like a rag doll and then try to shoot them with their own taser. And then when they respond with lethal force, the onlooker solution is to burn down a restaurant that had nothing to do with the incident. They hadn't called the police, on this guy or anything. And yet they put all the people in that restaurant out of work, and they put the firemen at risk that had to fight the fire. In fact, they wouldn't let the firemen near it for an hour. That kind of muddy, enraged thinking is good for nothing good to happen. The whole country, we've got a mass insanity. Everybody is consumed with rage, and they want action, and they want they're demanding the federal government put a stop. So what they do is they think, okay, we'll burn down the towns and the houses, and we'll clear the people out. Well, you know what? That's not going to get rid of the guerrillas. They'll camp in the woods. They'll camp in barns that are, where grown up into the trees where you can't even see them, things like that. Caves, whatever. They know how to get by. You're not going to deprive them of a location simply by running out the people. Excuse me, grabbing a drink. Okay, now let's go to picture 4. Here's one of Bingham's most famous paintings. Look at these poor people. Look at the fainting women, and there's a man laying on the ground with blood coming out from under his head where he's been shot. And look at this poor slave over here and his little boy, and they're just crying, and this is just awful. And here's this righteous military officer in blue uniform, you see. If you'll look at the resemblance, that's Bingham. Bingham has painted himself into the picture. Isn't that really cool? And if you look up on top, the highest soldier, he's got his back to you. He's wearing red legs. See, the righteous red legs are here to render what assistance that they can. Right. So he really stirred up the nation with these paintings. Now, this next painting, I'm not sure. I don't think it's his, but it's along the same lines. This is picture number 5. Here we have the cold-blooded Confederate soldier. Now, if you notice, this soldier is dressed in a Confederate uniform. He's complete with canteen. He's got his sword hanging there at his side. and we have another Confederate soldier behind him with a torch in his hand. These weren't Quantrill's men. They didn't look like that. And there's a guy getting a sword, looks like run through him over there on the right. And there's a guy, I see, he's got his sword up and he's hacking and slashing people to death. You already know from what we've covered, Quantrill's men didn't fight that way. There's no truth in this picture. The closest thing to truth is this soldier shooting this guy with a pistol. Of course, he's showing him shooting a woman, I think, as you know, nobody's being spared, because you have to if there aren't any atrocities against the women and children, you have to make them up, see, to get the public really stirred up, get them, heat that forge white hot, so you can pound that metal into any shape you want. But look at picture number 6. This one is really, it just tears me up. Now look at this here. Here we have a soldier, and of course Quantrill's men were all cavalry first off, and he's got a rifle, not a carbine. This is a rifle, and he's beating this guy to death with it. First off, you don't treat a rifle that way. No soldier is going to beat you to death. If you're going to hit somebody with a rifle, you hit them with the butt end. Or if you're, just trying to get their attention, you might smack them upside the head with the front of the barrel. But this kind of a scene, see, it was the most outrageous way that they could portray this. And Quantrill's men didn't do that. Yes, they killed 130 men in Lawrence. They simply shot them down. They didn't torture them. They didn't beat them to death. They killed them in battle, in a war, in a town that had been warned that he was coming. And he gave them plenty of time to put up extra defenses. They could have fortified, sandbags, all kinds of stuff they could have done, and they didn't do it because they did not take him seriously. Well, now they're taking him seriously. You better believe it. All right, let's get back in the book. Let's get back to General Ewing. The order came from district headquarters at St. Louis, where Schofield commanded. And though Schofield was through Schofield, they came to him from Washington, D.C. direct. Ewing had neither choice nor discretion in the matter. Now, this is Trow. Ewing is an enemy, and yet Trow, now this shows you his honesty. He's putting the blame where it ought to lie. He has respect for an enemy officer who is being accused of things that he's not really guilty of. That's an amazing quality in a guerrilla, isn't it? Who are supposed to be just brutes, brutes with low IQs. No, Trow was a soldier, period. And he has respect for another soldier. And he says, Ewing had neither choice nor discretion in the matter. He was a brave, conscientious, hard-fighting officer who did his duty as it came to him, into his hands to do. He could not have made, if he tried, one hair of the infamous order, black or white. It was a portion of the extraordinary order of things. In other words, he's saying, translated, it was due to the unusual circumstances that existed in the nation at the time. And we can relate to this. We really can. We have unusual circumstances in our nation at this very moment. And we've seen things that are crazy, things that don't make any sense. I don't know if all of you have heard, but in the some kind of a budget bill that they're pushing through Congress, they hid legislation to remove every single Confederate monument, any reference to the Confederates from all U.S. parks, national military parks. You'll go there and every monument will be to the Union, and there will not be one representation of a Confederate unit. There will not be markers to show where they fought. Their cannons won't be allowed to be displayed where the cannons were placed. You will get an aborted, really ruined look at what took place on these battlefields. Now, it hasn't passed. The House did it, and the Senate has to pass it. And I'm hoping that if they do, that Trump will veto it. But it is in process right now. See what Trow said, the extraordinary order of things? This is crazy. 160 years these battlefields have been recognized, and you don't destroy every reference to the enemy on a battlefield, because historians want to study these battles and learn from them. And to do that, they've got to know where each side was at what time of the battle, and so on. But you see, there is a mass insanity in the people are temporarily insane. And so they have put pressure on Washington. Washington has responded thusly. And now we do have atrocities taking place. Not only have the Jayhawkers run roughshod over the populace, but now the federal government officially is running roughshod over the populace. And if you think it can't happen again, you don't know the federal government. You'd better study what happened to the civilians in any war in any country, and you will understand that the welfare of the civilians is pushed to the side to obtain quote-unquote military objectives. And if that means you get burnt out, if that means you get shot down, if that means a lot of negative things, well, that's too bad. It's the price of war and quote-unquote security. Some of you may have seen the series, which I really like, called Young Indiana Jones. It was a series of shows where he gets involved with historical people and historical events. And it kind of shows, his background, that what he went through. He gets involved in World War I, he's in the trenches and so on, and he got involved with Pancho Villa, and he's all excited, and he's all gung-ho for Pancho Villa's efforts to free the Mexican people. And they come to this little town, and he comes to this little town with Villa's men, and he's talking to an old wrinkled Mexican sitting on the stone step of his little tiny hovel, his little tiny adobe or stone house. And he's talking to him, and he says, "We're here to bring you for freedom." And the Mexican looks at him and says, Juarez came to my village with his troops, and he said they were here they said they were here to bring me freedom. And he said, and they stole my chickens. And then he said, this other guy, Porfirio, I can't remember exactly, he came with his troops. And he said, we're here to bring you freedom. And he took my chickens. And he says, now Villa is here, and he says he's bringing me freedom, and his men have taken my chickens. Oh, what a profound lesson of history that was. What a profound lesson. All right. Okay, finish up with Ewing here. History in the end will separate the soldier from the man and render unto the garb of the civilian what has failed to concede to the uniform of the commander. As a citizen of the Republic, he deplored the cruelty of an enactment which he knew to be monstrous. But as a soldier in the line of duty, the necessity of the situation could not justify a moment's argument. He had but to obey and to execute, and he did both, and mercifully. So, this is one of the reasons Trow speaks well of him. Ewing tried to abate some of the hardest effects. He says, for nearly 3 weeks, Jackson County was a pandemonium together with the counties of Cass, Bates, Vernon, Clay, and Lafayette. Now, you folks that might be interested in pursuing artifacts from this period, take note of those counties. Cass, Bates, Vernon, Clay, and Lafayette. A lot of things happened there. A lot of houses were burned and never rebuilt. And people were killed and shot in the process because the Jayhawkers were still doing their stuff. And they died with their money buried in the ground. And it's, in many cases, it's still going to be there. There have to be hundreds of post-hole banks of mason jar type caches waiting to be found on anybody that would concentrate and work these areas and sites. Okay, so he says 6,000 Federals were in the saddle, but Quantrill held his grip upon these counties despite everything. Did you hear that? Quantrill held his grip despite being pursued by 6,000 Federal soldiers. Did you notice the title on the advertising blurb I put up for this part? It it said fighting against impossible odds and winning. Wouldn't you say Quantrill with a couple hundred men against 6,000 is impossible odds? And yet he maintains some control and influence on these counties in spite of it. He said depopulation was going on in a twofold sense, one by immigration or exodus, and one by the skillful killing of perpetual ambushment and lyings in wait. In detachments of 10, now here's a new tactic. In detachments of 10, the guerrillas divided up, and they fought everywhere. Scattered, they came together as if by instinct. If you thought a lot of fighting had gone on in Jackson County up till now, somebody just turned the heat to ultra high. They fought everywhere. Scattered, they came together as if by instinct. Driven from the flanks of one column, they appeared in the rear of another. They had voices that were as the voices of the night birds. Mysterious horsemen appeared on all the roads. Not a single Federal scouting or exploring party escaped paying toll. Sometimes the aggregate of the day's dead was simply enormous. Frequently, the assailants were never seen. Of a sudden, and rising, as it were, out of the ground, they delivered a deadly blow and rode away in the darkness, invisible. All right. Let's focus in on some of the specific skirmishes and battles that occurred during the fall and winter of 1863 and 1864. This is chapter 17 we're beginning. As the Lawrence raid put the whole Federal forces after us, it was a continuous fight. From September the 1st, 1863, excuse me, to Price's raid in August 1864. So we're talking 11 months of continuous fighting. But Quantrill held his own. Up to the time of the Lawrence Massacre, there had been no scalping done. After it, a good deal. Abe Haller, brother of Lieutenant William Haller, was wounded and hiding in some timber near Texas Prairie in the eastern edge of Jackson County. I looked for Texas Prairie. I wanted to put a picture of it up, but I could not find anything on it. All my searches were in vain. All we know is it's in the eastern edge of Jackson County. I did not go to the maps. I was looking for pictures where it was tagged. Could not find any. All right. So Lieutenant William Haller's wounded, hiding in some timber near Texas Prairie, and he faced 72 men, killing and wounding 5 of the attacking party before he fell. His slayers scalped him and cut off his ears. This is the Jayhawkers. Shortly afterwards, Andy Blunt came upon the body, mutilated as it was, and pointed out the marks of the knife to his companions. So here is the first incident of scalping. Let's face it, folks, that's barbaric. That's barbaric. Scalping never had the meaning for white people, white men, that it did for the Indians. The Indians, had particular reasons for doing it that were foreign to the thinking of white people, the white settlers. All right, now, this is just barbarism. And Andy Blunt is quoted as saying, "We have something to learn yet, boys, and we have learned it, scalp for scalp, hereafter." So, the Jayhawkers started it, and Quantrill's men picked it up. The next day, Blunt, Long, Clemens, Bill Anderson, and McGuire captured 4 militiamen from a regiment belonging to North Missouri. Blunt scalped each of the 4, leaving their ears intact, however. He said he had no use for them. Okay, the killing went on between Fire Prairie and another prairie I could not find, and Napoleon, a city that must be gone. I could not find it. But if you can locate where those two were, Greg Taylor, Nolan Little, and Frank James captured 6 of Pinnock's militiamen. You remember Pinnock was a captain of the Jayhawkers, and we talked about him in part 1, I believe, and I think I put his picture up on in the photos. So they held over them a kind of court-martial and killed them all. These were not scalped. All right. The next day, Richard Kinney, John Jarrett, Jesse James, and Sim Whitsett attacked a picket post of 8 men about a mile from Wellington and annihilated it, cutting them off from the town and running them in a contrary direction. Not a man escaped. Quantrill's been credited with killing about 5,000 federal militia and soldiers, and I think that total, frankly, is way low. I believe it could go double that easy. And you'll see why when we get to the Centralia Massacre a little later on here tonight. All right. Next one, 2 days afterwards on the Lexington Road, Pat O'Donnell, Frank James, Ben Morrow ambushed an entire federal company. That's 100 men between Salem Church on the Lexington Road and the Widow Childs. If you'll go to picture number 7, you will see the old Salem Church. It's apparently still standing. Okay. They fought 80 men for nearly an hour, killing 7 and wounding 13. O'Donnell was wounded 3 times, and James and Morrow each once slightly. This may well be the first of Jesse's 32 bullet scars. This may be the very first time he was wounded in combat. But that's pretty amazing. I'm sorry. I said Jesse, but it's getting through here. This is Frank James. So Frank was wounded slightly. Okay. All right, now, on the Shawneetown Road, Todd gathered together 30 of his old men and, getting a volunteer guide who knew every hog path in the country, went around past Kansas City boldly and took up a position on the Shawneetown Road, looking for a train of wagons bringing infantry into Kansas City. There were 20 wagons with 20 soldiers to the wagon, besides the drivers. Here and there between the wagons, intervals of 50 yards had been permitted to grow. Todd waited till all the wagons but 3 had passed by the point of his ambush when he sprang out upon them and poured into them and upon their jammed and crowded freight a deadly rain of bullets. Every shot told. Todd butchered 60 in the 3 wagons and turned away from his work of death and pursued the balance. Now, if you'll go to picture number 8, you will see the front cover of a Harper's Weekly, which was the big, it was like the National Enquirer back then. Everybody read Harper's Weekly. And they did a lot of, they hired journalists that were also artists, and they would draw pictures. And here is pictures of supposedly of Quantrill's men attacking a wagon train. This may not be the one with the men in it, because these wagons seem to be loaded with supplies, but I thought you'd like to see that. And if you'll notice, these guys are brandishing swords, and they're carrying rifles. That's not Quantrill's men. They did neither. They did absolutely neither. So you see, the public never got a chance to get a real idea of who Quantrill was, how his men fought. Okay, excuse me, I've got an intrusive company trying to sell me a virus program on my computer, and they just blocked my whole screen. All right, I got rid of them. I apologize. Boy, I hate that. That is rude and socially unaccepted. And any company that does that to me, I put them on a boycott forever list. I don't care if they're selling $10 bills for $5. I will do no business with anybody who rudely interrupts my work, telling me that their ad is more important than what I'm doing. Okay, all right, rant over. Let's continue. Okay, now at Independence, Cole Younger, while Todd was operating in Kansas, gathered about him 10 men and hid himself as close to Independence as it was possible to get. Put up some pictures of Independence and one of the other parts. I'll say this: if there are any out there listening live for the first time and you haven't heard what went before in the other parts, you're really at a disadvantage. This will make a lot more sense in many ways if you'll go back and listen to each part in order. Anyway, he got as close to Independence as possible without getting into town. Now, his eyes for some time had been fastened on a large corral. He sent William Halse out to reconnoiter the position and bring word of the guards stationed and protected. All right, if you'll look at picture number 9, you will see William Bill Halse. Looks properly ferocious, doesn't he? The hat kind of looks almost like an undersized Mexican sombrero, though. I would have told him to ditch the hat. I wonder what kind of a buckle he's wearing there. Nice rectangular big buckle. Might be a CS buckle. Okay. Hang on a minute. I forgot to close my group page. All right, I think we're done now. Nope. It's going to try to open up on me. All right. Chase the internet away. Let's get back to action here. So he sends Bill Halse out to reconnoiter, which he did. And afterwards, Younger avoided the pickets, and by 11 o'clock he made the distance, halting at the turning off place on the main road, giving his horses in charge of 2 of the detachment. With the other 8 on foot, led by Halse, he crept close to the reserve post and fired point blank into the sleeping guards, some rolled up in their blankets and some resting at ease about the fire. Choosing his way as well as possible by the uncertain light, Younger escaped unpursued with 3 excellent horses to the man after killing 17 Federals in the night attack and wounding many more, some of which, of course, would have died later. All right, that brings us to chapter 18, and we're going to start out with the Blue Springs fight in December 1863. The Blue Springs fight. Colonel Pennick's men came from Independence down to Blue Springs and burned houses, killed old men too old to be in the service. They numbered 200, while Quantrill's men numbered 100. I would say that the 200 didn't stand a chance if Quantrill had that many. On the road from Blue Springs to Independence, they killed John Sanders and a man named Kimberlin, both old men, and left them lying in the roadway. If neighbors had not offered their services, the hogs would have eaten their bodies. They burned from 2 to 12 houses and left the families homeless. Okay, if you look at picture number 10, this is a artist's rendering on an old postcard of the main street in Blue Springs, Missouri. You can see it's got a dirt street. So that'll give you a little idea what the town looked like at the time. The people of the neighborhood sent a runner to Quantrill. We mounted, struck a gallop, and did not slow down till we charged the rear, and we went through them like fire through stubble, killing as we went. After the battle was over, we counted 75 killed and an equal number wounded. That's 150 out of 200. Those who were not hit were so scared that we had no more trouble with them. On our retreat, Quantrill's password was, "Bat them, boys, over the left eye." In other words, shoot them over the left eye as a trademark, as a sign of who did it. And you're going to love this. A good old citizen by the name of Uncle George Raider, hearing the firing and seeing us coming, got off his horse and laid down in the woods close to the road. He was face up, and he had a belly on him like a 10-gallon beer keg. Quantrill said to Dick Burns, "Go out there and bat him over the left eye." Burns went out to him and hollered back to Quantrill that he's been dead a week. See how he is swelled up? We had lots of fun afterwards about his belly saving him. That's called the vicissitudes of war. Strange things happen in war. And here, ordinarily a belly like that on an old man is a contributor to a premature death. It's not good. It's not something you should have on you, and I'm working on mine right now, and I'm happy to say I have managed to lose 5 pounds this week. Still got another 35 to go, and I'm determined to do it. I'm not going to be like Uncle George Raider here, but in this case, it actually saved his life. And the guerrillas had a sense of humor. They didn't say, "Oh man, that guy got away from me. I'm going to track him down and kill him." They just laughed about it. It was a joke. Okay, so now we've come to chapter 19, and this is entitled Wellington. Wellington. 4 miles past Old Wellington stood a large house occupied by some lewd women. Oh, we're going to get into another house of prostitution episode here. This is a different one from the one that Jesse James was involved in that we've already covered. Oh, and by the way, picture number 11 will show you modern day Wellington. Not too impressive in this picture. If there's an old Wellington, I could not find it. But I wanted to show you a little bit of what Wellington looks like. It reminds me of a lot of the cities in Oklahoma that we went through a year before last when we went out to New Mexico. Okay. Poole, if you remember Dave Poole, knew the situation well and struggled or suggested to Jarrett, that is John Jarrett, and I'll have their pictures up here in a moment, that a sufficient detour should be made to encompass the building. Now, if you'll go to picture number 12, please, you'll see Dave Poole. He has the dead eyes of a sociopath. For some of the men that killed, their eyes just went dead. means, that they had no emotions connected to their killing. Now, if you look at John Jarrett and look at his eyes, they aren't quite dead like Dave Poole's. And by the way, here's a John Jarrett would survive the war, and here is a great picture. Surprised to find of John Jarrett and Josie Younger, Cole Younger's sister that he married. Thought she'd enjoy seeing that. She wasn't a bad-looking woman. Okay. Now. Okay, so we're dealing with this house of prostitution 4 miles past Old Wellington. That would be a great place to metal detect if it could be done, if it's still standing, or even the site if it were not. Pick number 12. We've already done that. Arriving there about 11 o'clock at night, it appeared from the outside as if there was some kind of a frolic. We would say party today. That was just a term of the day. Frolic, some kind of a party. Excuse me. Grab some water there. Lost my place now. Okay, here we go. Lights shone from many of the windows. Music and the sound of dancing feet could be heard occasionally. Frank James crept to a back door and looked in and counted 5 women and 11 men. It's kind of similar to the same situation that Jesse found at the other house of prostitution. I'm trying to remember. I think it was somewhere close to Centralia, but we're going to be talking about Centralia here shortly because there was a major event that took place there that we want to cover. Okay, some of the men were sitting on the laps of the women. You're kidding me. That's I'd more expect that in our present society than back then. These must have been some stout women. And some were so close to others that to risk a volley would be murderous. You see, they had lines that they'd drawn in the sand. They said, well, we're going to kill these Yankees. They're wearing the uniform. They're soldiers. They're combatants. But we don't want to kill the women, even though they're prostitutes. They could have said, well, they're just worthless prostitutes. You see, they weren't cold-blooded murders in that sense. They saw themselves as soldiers, and they picked soldiers' targets. Excuse me. At no time without hitting a woman could they make sure of hitting a man. They waited an hour to gain a favorable opportunity, but waited in vain, and Jarrett solved the problem. He was dressed in federal uniform, and after placing his men so as to cut off any escape from the house if the occupants once came outside, he rode boldly up to the fence in front of the premises and cried, "Hello!" A soldier came to the door with a gun in his hand and answered him. Jarrett continued, "Who are you that you come to this place in defiance of every order issued for a month? What business have you here tonight? Who gave you permission to come? Where are your passes? Come out here and let me read them." Thinking Jarrett was a provost captain scouting for runaways from the Lexington garrison, 10 of the 11 militiamen started confidently for the fence, receiving when halfway the crushing fire of 20 concealed guerrillas. It was one of those few times that the guerrillas outnumbered their targets, or one of the more unusual times. In a space 4 blankets might have covered, the 10 fell and died. Only one of the lot discharging a weapon or making a pretense of resistance. Frank James stooped to count them, and as he rose, he remarked, "There are but 10 here. A while ago, there were 11. The building was entered, searched from top to bottom in every nook and corner, still no soldier. The women were questioned one at a time, separately. They knew only that when the man at the fence called, they all went out together. Frank James, whose passive face had from the first expressed neither curiosity nor doubt, spoke up again and briefly. A while ago, I counted but 5 women. Now there are 6. He'd be good. You know, he was a surgeon, and that's good because he wouldn't leave any pads or tools in you because he counts things. All right. Say, except for 4 sentinels on duty at either end of the main road, guerrillas had gathered together in the lower large room of the dwelling house. The fire had burned low and was fitful and flickering, and where there had been a half a dozen candles, there were now only 2. Bring more, said Poole, and we will separate this wolf from the ewes. Aye, if we have to strip the lot, spoke up a coarse voice in the crowd. Silence, cried Girette, laying a hand upon a pistol and turning to his men in the shadow. Not a woman shall be touched. We are wild beasts, yes, but we war on wild beasts. I think that's well put. I like that. Yes, we're wild beasts, but we war on wild beasts. Okay. More light was brought, and with a candle in each hand, Poole went from woman to woman, scanning the face of each long and searchingly, and saying when he had finished, I give it up. If one of those 6 here is a man, let him keep his dress and his scalp. Frank James, just behind Poole, had inspected each countenance also, as the candles passed before it. And when Poole had done speaking, Frank laid a finger upon a woman's shoulder and spoke as one having authority. This is the man. If I miss my reckoning, shoot me dead. The marvelous nerve which up to this time had stood with the militiaman as a shield and a defense deserted him. Pardon me. When the extremity came, he turned ghastly white, trembled to his feet, and fell sobbing and praying on his knees. Horrified by the slaughter in the yard and afraid to rush from the house, lest he be shot down also, he hurriedly put on the garments of one of the women, composed his features as best he could, and waited in suspense the departure of the guerrillas. Almost a boy, his smooth face was fresher and fairer than the face of any real woman there. His hair, worn naturally long and inclined to be brown, was thick and fine. The dress hid his feet, or the boots would have betrayed him at the start. Not knowing that an observation had been made before the firing, and the number accurately taken of both men and women, he hoped to brave it through and laugh afterwards and tell his messmates how near death had passed it by him and did not stop. The reaction upon discovery was pitiful. He was too young to die. He pleaded. He had never harmed a human being in his life. He was spared. If he was spared, he would abandon the army and throw away his gun. As he prayed, he wept, but Girette abated further abasement of his manhood. In other words, Girette was kind of disgusted at the way the kid was abasing his dignity himself. And he says, he is yours, James, and fairly yours. And when he had changed color ever so little under Poole's inspection, you saw it, and no other man saw it. And he belongs to you. Take him. And this may be a misspelling because I don't know this word. Propriety, not propriety, but P-E-I-T-Y. I don't know what it is. In human flesh was often disposed of this way. Priority is, okay, it should have been priority in human flesh was often disposed of in this way. Come, said Frank James, lifting the young Federal up to his feet with his left hand and drawing his revolver with his right. Come outside, it is not far to go. Scarcely able to stand, can you imagine the terror in this poor kid? You know, he's probably 18 at the most. Scarcely able to stand, yet unresisting, the militiamen followed the guerrilla, the lamb following the tiger. As they went by the ghastly heap, that is the bodies, all ragged and intangible in the uncertain light, the kid shuddered and the guerrilla was glad. At the fence, the poor prisoner was so weak he could scarcely climb it. Beyond the fence was the road, and down this road, a few hundred yards towards Lexington, Frank James led his victim. Lexington, Missouri, of course. Under the shadows of a huge tree, he halted. It was quite dark there. Only the good God could see what was done. The leaves shut the stars out. Do not kill me for my mother's sake, came from the pinched lips of the poor victim. for I have no one else to pray for me. Spare me just this once." "You are free," said James. "Go." And as he spoke, he pointed in the direction of Lexington. "Free? You're not going to kill me? You tell me to go? Great God, am I sleeping or awake?" And the man's teeth chattered as he shook it as if in a fit of ague. "Yes, go, and quickly. You're past the guards, past all danger. You belong to me, and I give you your life. Go." At that moment, Frank James lifted his pistol in the air and fired. When he returned to the house, Jarrett, who had heard the pistol shot, rallied him. That is, tried to give him some support. "Yes," he said, "it was soon over." James had just taken the trouble to save the life of a Federal soldier because he had appealed to him in the name of his mother. Now, let me add this, that the guerrillas did spare from time to time. This was not like the only time it ever happened by any means. But, and although Trow doesn't mention it, when they spared someone, they warned them, "If you're ever caught by us again, if you're ever captured by us in uniform, we will kill you, and there will be no appeal." And they did catch some that they had spared their lives back in uniform, riding with the militia, and they did as they warned them. They hung them. All right, so Jarrett continued on his raid, and south of Lexington, 6 miles. South of Lexington, 6 miles. How's that for X marks the spot? He came suddenly upon 9 Federals in a schoolhouse, sheltered against a heavy rain that was falling. After shooting the 9 and appropriating the house, he propped each corpse up to a desk, put a book before it, and wrote upon the blackboard fixed against a wall, "John Jarrett and David Poole taught this school today for 1 hour. We found the pupils all loyal, and we left them as we found them." Again, in the German settlement, a company of militia were engaged and cut to pieces. A company, 100 men, were engaged and cut to pieces. So they had at least probably 20 to 40% casualties. Near Dover, 5 militiamen from Carroll County were caught encamped at Tebow Bridge and shot. If you'll go to pictures number 13 and 14, you will see part of the old stone bridge columns from the Civil War days on Tebow Creek. This would have been a covered bridge that went across, and I'm sure it was burned at some point during the war. If you look at picture 14, you will see what the bridge over Tebow Creek looks like. So I'd bet the house that these 5 militiamen were not the only ones who ever encamped there. I'll bet this was used as a regular camping spot on soldiers marching back and forth, and there were probably a number of skirmishes and things going on here. I would love to get on this site you're looking at in picture 14 with my metal detector. Love to get into the woods and around the creek, down the creek bank there and everything, because I think there's going to be some stuff to find. All right, we're going to go back to our story. Near Waverly, 10 men at odd times were picked up and put out of the way. And on the return march to Jackson County, no less than 43 straggling Federals in squads of from 3 to 9 were either surprised or overtaken and executed without trial or discussion. Do you realize how many Federal casualties we've just covered in just a very few days? This is why I'm saying I think they must have killed more than 10,000. That's just an opinion. It's not based on fact. But I would say that per man engaged, they killed more of the enemy than any other unit in the entire Civil War on either side. On either side. All right, that brings us to chapter 20. And this is called the Grinter Fight. A Dutch colonel with his company of men. That's unusual. Usually for a company, you would have a captain commanding. A colonel would usually be a regiment, 10 companies. But this Dutch colonel with his company of men one day came into Piser's Saloon in Independence, Missouri, and I went looking for Piser's Saloon, couldn't find a trace of it. Sorry to disappoint you there. And they got to drinking pretty freely and said to Piser, the saloon keeper, "Does you knows where that Quantrill, that kill devil is? Give us another drink. We are going out and get that Quantrills today. Brings his scalps in on our bridle bits," or that is bridle bits. They tend to pronounce B's like a V. Piser, a friend of both Federals and Confederates, pleaded with him to leave the job alone. The Dutch colonel wore a pair of earrings as big as a ring in a bull's nose. Well, that's unusual. Don't remember ever seeing a picture of a Civil War soldier wearing earrings. I know a lot of our soldiers today would if the regulations allowed them to. But I think I don't know if they let them wear little diamond studs or not or whatever. But anyway, he's wearing these things, and they're big. "Give us another drinks," the Dutch colonel said. "I tell you, we are going after Quantrills, and when I finds him, he's going to say Halse. And when I says Halse, that means him stops a little while." Okay, and the Dutch did talk like that. They sure did. The Dutch immigrant troops in the Civil War. So they took Independence and Harrisonville Muddy Road, and I should recognize the fact I probably didn't do a very good job of imitating the accent, but I think you get the drift. So they took the Independence and Harrisonville Muddy Road and found Quantrill camp close to Old Man Grinner's, and as usual, always ready for any surprise. I'm sorry, the problem with the words, part of it's missing. I'm going to put in words due to the fact that he'd been surprised so much. When the Dutch colonel and his company came in sight, Quantrill ordered his men to mount and charge, which they did. And when the smoke cleared away, only 2 remained to tell the story. 2 out of a company of 100, roughly 100. Could have been less, could have been a little more. They were a couple of hundred. Hello, excuse me. Pardon me, we'll get a drink right quick, and I'll try to read that again. They were a couple of hundred yards away, sitting on their horses, cursing us, calling us all kinds of damns of sesh, telling us to come on. I said to Sim Whitsett, now, if you'll go to pick number 15, you will see Sim Whitsett. Boy, he was kind of a wild-looking fellow. That hairdo almost reminds me of the professor in that old movie Back to the Future. If any of you have seen that. He looks almost like a mad scientist to me, but that's Sim Whitsett, and he was quite the guerrilla. And we'll hear more from him shortly here. So I said to Sim Whitsett, let's give them a little chase. This is Tro. And they seemed to be so brave. So we took after them, but they would not stand. They broke and ran. We ran them for a quarter of a mile down the big road. One fell off his horse dead, and the other one jumped off and ran into Old Man Grinner's house. Mrs. Grinner was in the yard. He ran to her and said, hide me. She put him under a bee gum. Now, a lot of you younger people won't know what a bee gum is. I know most of you have seen present-day beehives, which are little square or rectangular shaped, little tower-shaped things, about 3 or 4 feet high. This isn't what this was. It was a cone-shaped. You'll still see pictures of them on the labels of honey. They'll actually show a bee gum. That was what beehives looked like back during the Civil War. And they were big, a lot bigger than the beehives are now. And so she hit him under the bee gum because it was hollow at the bottom, and the bees were up in the top. Boy, he better hope that the bees left him alone. But it was that or die. Sim and I stopped, but we never could find him. Sim does not, to this day, like the Grinner name. Sim said, I got the earrings, meaning he took the earrings off the dead colonel. But he is the lad. Now he's referring to the missing soldier they could not find. In other words, he took it a little personal. He outdid me. He outslicked me, outsmarted me. He afterwards gave the earrings to a girl on Texas Prairie, Missouri. And Trove finishes up the chapter by saying, poor old Dutchman, he lost his life with all his men but one. Okay, we've come to chapter 21, and we are about to get into one of the most amazing events of the war, the Centralia Massacre. And I want to mention something here. Quantrill, Bloody Bill Anderson broke off from Quantrill, and Todd did too, in younger, and they went out with their own men at times. But Quantrill's always around until now. They're about to get into one of the biggest fights they've had, and Quantrill is nowhere to be seen. Trove doesn't mention him. He's conspicuously absent. And Cole Younger is absent. And I'm wondering, I'm the suspicious type when I see things like this. The history detective in me puts me on the trail. And I'm wondering if Quantrill was not beginning to be involved in activities regarding the Knights of the Golden Circle, because he seems to disappear for certain times, and then he pops back up again. And this is one of those, because anytime you got over 200 guerrillas together, that Quantrill was usually leading them, but Quantrill was not in this case. The Battle of Centralia, Quantrill's forces were led by George Todd, and let's see. History calls this a battle of massacre, but Trove says there never was a fight during the Civil War that was fought any more fairly than this battle was fought. Now, the victors write the history, and I'm going to prove to you that they deliberately lied about this battle and the results of it in an effort to make it look like, to make the Federal defeat look like it wasn't their fault. It wasn't as bad as it was. But we're going to see that indeed the truth reveals that it was extremely bad for the Federals, extremely bad, as we're going to see here. Okay. Now, along about September 1864 at Paris in Monroe County, and we want to refer to pictures number 16 and 17. There's a picture of Paris, Missouri back in the day, and a little history. The first Confederate unit in the area was organized here in 1861. Union forces briefly occupied the town July 1862. And on October 15, 1864, about 400 Confederates attacked a company of federal militia quartered in the Glen House Hotel. The militia surrendered after a 3-hour battle. So they had a battle right in downtown Paris. Okay, now I think this is one of my favorite pictures in this particular supplemental. Picture number 17. This is the Union Covered Bridge near Paris, Missouri. There isn't any doubt that Civil War camping and fighting took place around it. It is original covered bridge. It's been restored, and they had to pull the siding off to keep a flood from tearing the bridge down. They pulled the siding off to let the water flow across the floor of the bridge and take pressure off of the side of the bridge. And when this picture was taken, they had not been able to raise the money yet for the new siding. So there's your little history on this bridge, the modern day portion of it. Okay. So along about 18 September 64 in Monroe County, there had been a federal garrison 300 strong under the command of a Major Johnson. These soldiers on the watch for Anderson had been busy in scouting expeditions and had come down as near to Centralia as the town of Sturgeon, and I forgot to look up Sturgeon as far as a picture. After Anderson had done all the devilment that he could lay his hands to in Centralia and had retired again to the Singleton camp, Major Johnson came into the pillaged town, swearing all kinds of fearful and frightful things. Now we want to go to pictures 18 and 19. 18 shows you downtown Centralia. Still with dirt streets and horses and wagons. I don't know the exact date on the picture, but couldn't have been too long after the Civil War. Look at the big trees planted along the sidewalks. And then in picture 153, this is another one of the downtown streets from an old postcard. This is Locust Street. Okay. At the head of his column, a black flag was carried. Also, there was one at the at the head of Todd's column. So, both the guerrillas and Major Anderson's command are operating under the black flag. No quarter asked or given. Wounded not spared, prisoners not spared. In Johnson's ranks, the stars and stripes for this day had been laid aside. Now, you'll find this interesting. In the ranks of the guerrillas, dressed in the enemy's uniforms, the stars and stripes flew fair and free, as if there had been the intention to add to the desperation of the sable banner the gracefulness and abandon of legitimate war. Of course, the flag, would identify them from a distance as federal troops. So the guerrillas are wearing federal uniforms, and they're actually carrying the stars and stripes. And Johnson does not have the American flag displayed. He has the black flag displayed. Now, just a moment. Okay. I've got an incredible picture to show you in regards to the black flag here just shortly. The Union citizens of Centralia, knowing Anderson only in his transactions, that is, his battles, besought Johnson to beware of him. They told him and his command were no match for Anderson. It would be useless to sacrifice both himself and his men. Anderson had not retreated. He was in ambush somewhere about the prairie. He would swoop down like an eagle. He would smite and spare not. The Yankee major was as brave as the best of them, but it was a foolish bravery because he did not know what he was doing. He had never in his life fought guerrillas. Why they sent those men into situations without training is beyond me. So neither Johnson nor his men are aware of how the guerrillas fight. That is a huge intelligence failure. It's bad enough they don't have any training facing them, but to not even know what to expect if they confront them, it builds false confidence, especially in this major who had a large economy-size ego. You know, this guy is an awful lot like the generals that were put in command of the fledgling American army right, after the Revolutionary War, and during the war even, during the war, and were sent into the frontier areas like Kentucky here to fight the Indians, to give the settlers some relief from all the attacks. Time after time, these political idiots led their men into ambushes. The Indians did not fight straight up. It's not like in the movies where you see, the cavalry charges the Indians and the Indians charge the cavalry and they mix it up, and the cavalry shoots down the Indians by the dozens. The Indians didn't fight that way. They did not have the doctrine of quote unquote acceptable casualties. That is a curse that has stuck to the U.S. Army since its very beginning. And so the Indians only fought when it was to their advantage, just like the guerrillas. They would make an advantage sometimes. But the point was, these kind of officers like Johnson, whether they were in the Civil War or whether in the Revolutionary War, they never learned. They never learned. And they usually didn't live long enough to learn a lot. Now see here, we're into 1863 and 1864. And by this time, there are a growing number of survivors among the militia and the federal troops of guerrilla combat. They have been in multiple fights. They know how the guerrillas fight. They know, what to do, what not to do, and yet they're still hindered by regulations. They're not allowed to carry 6 pistols and fight the guerrillas on their own terms. They're still trying to fight the guerrillas with carbines. And even worse, it appears from both Trow and historical marker we'll be looking at in a little while, that Anderson's men, of all things, were equipped with muskets. Muzzle-loading muskets. And they're cavalrymen. They're on horses. Do you know how hard it is to load a musket? And they're new men. They're not experienced. They're new recruits, and they're given the worst guns. And this major thinks, with all of these things against him, he's going to take on a bunch of battle-hardened guerrillas. You talk about Fantasy Island. Wow, what an ego. Johnson listened patiently to the warnings that were well meant, and he put away firmly the hands that were lifted to stay his horse. He pointed gleefully to his black flag and boasted that quarters should neither be given nor asked. He had come to carry back with him the body of Bill Anderson, and that body he would have dead or alive. But then a very interesting incident happens. Troce's fate, however, had not yet entirely turned his face away from the federal officer. As he rode out from the town at the head of his column, a young Union girl described as very fair and beautiful rushed up to Major Johnson and halted him. She spoke as one inspired. She declared that she'd had a presentiment and that if he led his men that day against Bill Anderson, she felt and knew that but few of them would return alive. The girl almost knelt in the dust as she pleaded with this leader, but again it was to no avail. The major would have his way, driven by a false confidence in himself and his command's fighting ability under his leadership. Trow says Johnson's blood was all on fire, and he would march and fight no matter whether death waited for him 1 mile off or 100 miles off. And I'm going to pause here and tell you from the story to ask you, please learn a lesson of life if you have not done so already. You out there who are under the age of 40, I would like you to especially pay attention for the next few sentences that come out of my mouth here. Because what I'm going to tell you could save your life and keep you out of trouble more than once during the next 40 years of your existence. The major was fighting with his emotions and not his head. Let me say that again. The major was going into battle with his emotions, not his head. Zeal for an intended action can easily blind a person to the realities, the difficulties, if you please, and what the consequences of failure will be. This is how people get into $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 worth of credit card debt or more. They ruled over their credit cards with their emotions instead of their head. In this case, there's a lot more at stake. Of all the emotions to let rule your thinking and your decisions, anger is the worst. And Major Johnson was not only foolish, he was an angry man. Trow tells us about it. He says he not only carried a black flag himself and swore to give no quarter, he had declared on his return that he would devastate the country and leave of the habitations of the Southern men not one stone upon another. He was, had a screen jumped up and interfered with my read. Hang on. Let me get my place back. He was greatly enraged towards the last. He cursed the people as damned success and swore that they were in league with the murderers and robbers. Extermination, in fact, was what they all needed, according to Johnson. And if fortune favored him in the fight, it was extermination that all should have. Fortune, as far as the major was concerned, had become disgusted with his bloated ego and had packed up and gone home for the day and would not be an influence in what was to come. The major's arrogance-driven decisions would decide the day almost before the battle even started. Johnson rode east of south, probably 3 miles. The scouts who went to Singleton's barn, so now we know where the Singleton camp was. It was in somebody's barn named Singleton Farm. The scouts who went to the barn where Anderson camped came back to say the guerrillas had been there, had fed there, had rested there, and gone down into the timber beyond to hide themselves. It was now about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Back from the barn, a long high ridge lifted itself up from the undulating level of the more regular country and broke the vision southward. Beyond this ridge, a wide, smooth prairie stretched itself out, and still beyond this prairie and further to the south was the timber in which the scouts said Bill Anderson was hiding. Now, if you go to picture number 20, this is the Centralia battlefield. This is where the so-called Centralian Massacre took place. You'll see a marker, and then you'll look across the field towards the tree line. You'll see what looks like another little marker. I'm not sure, but I think these might be marking the battle line of the Federal soldiers under Johnson. But I want you to look especially at the figure on the right, that is Quantrill's flag bearer. And his name is Jack Schwartz. And he is holding in his hand, and I have circled it with a yellow circle, the actual black flag that Quantrill fought under. I wasn't sure they would, anybody would want to carry a flag, but this man was the official flag bearer, and there is the black flag, and he took it home with him from the war. He survived, and he had it at the time of his death around 1900, and it has been lost to history. Nobody knows what happened to the flag after he died. But I thought you'd like to see that. That is an incredibly historic photograph, and that was one of my great victories as I was researching and looking for photographs to post with this part of the presentation. Okay, we'll go on into the battle now. As Johnson rode towards the ridge, still distant from it a mile or so, 10 men anticipated him by coming up fair to view and forming a skirmish line. The leader of this little band, Captain John Thrailkill, had picked for the occasion David and John Poole, Frank and Jesse James, Tuck Hill, Peyton Long, Ben Morrow, James Younger, E.P. DeHart, Ed Greenwood, and Harrison Trow. So these just 10 guys appear on the crest of this ridge, and the 300 Federal soldiers are looking at them. It must have looked like a pretty pitiful little effort to Johnson. Next to Thrailkill rode Jesse James. Next to Jesse Frank, Johnson had need to beware of what might be before him in the unknown when such giants as these begin to show themselves. But tragically for him, all he saw was a pitiful skirmish line of only 10 men on horseback. He didn't know who they were. He didn't recognize them. Now, this is the truth about the odds. The guerrillas numbered, all told, exactly 262. In Anderson's company, there were 61 men, in George Todd's 48, in Poole's 49, in Thomas Todd's 54, and in Thrailkill's 50. 262 against 300. That is the truth about what that history has covered up by lying. And I will show you what the marker says shortly. Just bear with me. Let's look at picture 21. And you see 3 men. You see George Todd. George Todd was the commander of the guerrillas that day. And you can see he's dressed in a Federal uniform in the picture. And then you see John Thrailkill in the center and Tuck Hill down on the end there. These guys were 2 of the skirmishers. And, of course, Trow was one of them. We've already seen his picture. Okay, so as Thrailkill went forward to skirmish with the advancing enemy, Todd came out of the timber where he'd been hiding and formed a line of battle in an old field in front of it. Still further to the front, a sloping hill half a mile away rose between Johnson and the guerrillas. Further to the front, a sloping hill half a mile away rose between Johnson and the guerrillas. So the guerrillas are coming towards Johnson. They're coming down this slope from the crest. Todd rode to the crest of this, pushing Thrailkill well forward into the prairie beyond, and took his position there. When he lifted his hat and waved it, the whole force was to move rapidly on. Anderson held the right. George Todd joined to Anderson, Poole to George Todd, Thomas Todd to Poole, and Thrailkill to Thomas Todd, and thus were the ranks arrayed. The 10 skirmishers quickly surmounted the hill and disappeared. Todd, as a carved statue, stood his horse upon its summit. Johnson moved right onward. Some shots at long range were fired, and some bullets from the muskets of the Federals reached to and beyond the ridge where Todd watched. Peyton Long by his side. Okay, he watched with Peyton Long by his side. Okay. From a column of fours, Johnson's men galloped at once into line of battle, right in front, and marched so, pressing up well and calmly. Well, you know what? If they went from a column of fours into a line of battle, that tells me they were not new recruits, because new recruits cannot do that easily. They have to practice and practice and practice that. It's an important maneuver, and it's taught cavalry. So they have had some training. This proves it right here. Remember, Tro's an eyewitness. He's there. He's right out in front. He's in front of, with the 9, in front of the whole guerrilla force. The advanced guerrillas opened fire briskly at first, and the skirmishing grew suddenly hot. Thrailkill, however, knew his business too well to tarry long at such work and fell back towards the ridge. As this movement was being executed, Johnson's men raised a shout and dashed forward together, and in a compact mass order formation, ranks all gone. This looked bad. Such sudden exultation over a skirmish wherein none were killed exhibited nervousness. Such a spontaneous giving away of the body, even beyond the will of their commander, should have manifested neither surprise nor delight, and looked ominous for discipline. Well, see, this is because they haven't fought the guerrillas before. They had training enough to get into a battle line from columns of fours, but when it came to discipline, they're letting their emotions, they're seeing in the retreat of the 10 skirmishers a victory, and the victory hadn't even begun. Thrailkill formed again when he reached Todd's line of battle, and Johnson rearranged his ranks and went towards the slope at a brisk walk. Some upon the right broke into a trot, but he halted them, cursed them, and bade them look better to their line. Up the hill's crest, however, a column of men suddenly rode into view, halted, dismounted, and seemed to be busy or confused about something. This is what it looked like to Johnson. Inexperienced, Johnson is declared to have said to his adjutant, "They will fight on foot." What does that mean? It meant that the men were tightening their saddle girths, putting fresh caps on their revolvers, looking well to bridle reins and bridle bits, and preparing for a charge that would have about it the fury of a whirlwind. By and by the guerrillas were mounted again. From a column they transported themselves into a line 2 deep with a double interval between all files. At a slow walk, they moved over the crest towards Major Johnson, now advancing at a walk that was more brisk. Perhaps it was now 5 o'clock. The September sun was low in the west, not red nor angry, but an Indian summer sun. Pardon me. Got to grab some water. We have a lot of sycamore trees on our place here, and the sycamore pollen this year has really congested me up, and I have been fighting it all summer, so I apologize. All right, so here we get some purple prose. The crisp grass crinkled underfoot. A distance of 500 yards separated the two lines. Not a shot had been fired since the skirmish. Todd showed a naked front, bare of skirmishers, and stripped for a fight that he knew would be murderous to the Federals. And why should they not stand? The black flag waved alike over each, and from the lips of the leaders each, there had been all that day only threats of extermination and death. Johnson halted his men and rode along his front, speaking a few calm and collected words. They could not be heard in Todd's ranks, but they might have been divined. Most battle speeches are the same. They abound in good advice. They are generally full of such sentences as this: aim low, keep cool, fire when you get loaded, let the wounded lie till the fight is over. But could it be possible that Johnson meant to receive the charge of the guerrillas at a halt? What cavalry books had he read? Who had taught him such ruinous and suicidal tactics? And yet, monstrous as the resolution was in a military sense, it had actually been made, and Johnson called out loud enough to be heard by the opposing force, "Come on, we're ready for the fight." The challenge was accepted. The guerrillas gathered themselves together as if by a sudden impulse, took the bridle reins between their teeth. In the hands of each man there was a deadly revolver. There were carbines too, but they had never been unslung, and of course they hardly ever were. The sun was not high, and there was the great need to finish quickly whatever had need to be done. Riding the best and fastest horses in Missouri, George Shepard, Al Shepard, Frank Gregg, Morrow McGuire, Alan Palmer, Henson, Leif Priven, James Younger, Press Webb, Babe Hudspeth, Dick Burns, Ambrose, and Thomas Maxwell, Richard Kinney, Cy and Ike Flannery, Jesse and Frank James, David Poole, John Poole, Ed Greenwood, Al Scott, Frank Gray, George Maddox, Dick Maddox, DeHart, Jeff Emery, Bill Anderson, Tuck Hill, James Cummins, John Roop, Silas King, James Coram, Moses Huffaker, Ben Broomfield, Peyton Long, Jack Sutherland, William Reynolds, William and Charles Stewart, Bud Pence, Nat T, Gooley Robertson, Hiram Guest, Buster Parr, William Gall, Chat Rennick, Henry Porter, Arch and Henry Clements, Jesse Hamlet, John Threlkill, Cy Gordon, George Todd, Thomas Todd, his brother William and Hugh Archie, Plunk Murray, Ling Litton, Joshua Esther, Sam Wade, Creth Creek, Theodore Castle, John Chapman, and 70 men of other unnamed heroes struck fast the Federal ranks as if the rush was a rush of tigers. Frank James, riding a splendid race mare, led by half a length, then Arch Clements, then Ben Morrow, then Peyton Long, and then Harrison Trow. All right, let's look at picks 22 through 26. You see, so these are some of the men that were there in that charge. George Maddox, there's Cy Gordon, Andy McGuire. We heard Andy mentioned earlier. Pick 23 has got Alan Palmer. That's 2 pictures of him there. He survived the war, and he married Jesse James' sister, Susan. And I wish I could have gotten her picture. I found her picture, but I could not copy it. And she was quite an attractive lady. She was a good-looking woman. And she married this guy, Alan Palmer. And Press Webb, we're going to get a whole chapter devoted to Press Webb in the next part. Press Webb was a scout for Quantrill. He gathered intelligence, and he was really good at it. Okay, going on to page 24, we have Little Archie Clements and Bloody Bill Anderson, and then this is a charcoal drawing of one of the men named Ben Broomfield. Saw a picture of him but could not copy it. This is the best I could do on him. And then in picture number 25, we have Bud Pence. There's Babe Hudspeth. There's Henry Porter, 2 of the names mentioned. And those are other guerrillas. And here's an interesting photo. This is Captain William H. Stewart, who's mentioned in this charge. That's him dead. He's got a bullet hole in his forehead and one by his lip, and probably a few more elsewhere on his body. That's a picture taken after his death. And then in picture number 26, we have 3 more. There's Newton Plunk Murray and James Younger, younger brother, double entendre there. He is the less aged brother of Cole Younger, and there's Silas King over there on the right. Okay, now let's see what happens. Let's get back to the fight. There was neither trot nor gallop. The guerrillas simply dashed from a walk into a full run. The attack was a hurricane. Johnson's command fired 1 volley and not a gun thereafter. It scarcely stood until the 500 yards were passed over. Johnson cried out to his men to fight to the death, but they did not wait even to hear him through. Some broke ranks as soon as they had fired, and they fled. Others were attempting to reload their muskets, See, Tro's telling us they had muskets and not carbines as they should have had. When the guerrillas, firing right and left, hurled themselves upon them, Johnson fell among the first, mounted as described. Frank James singled him out, but he did not know him then, but he singled him out because he was the leader, and no words were spoken between the two. When James had reached within 5 feet of Johnson's position, he put out a pistol suddenly and sent a bullet through his brain. Johnson threw out his hands as if he was trying to reach something above his head and pitched forward heavily, a corpse. There was no quarter. Many begged for mercy on their knees. The guerrillas heeded the prayer as a wolf might the bleating of a lamb. The wild rout broke up near Sturgeon. The implacable pursuit, vengeful as hate, thundering in the rear. Death did its work in twos, threes, and squads, singly. Beyond the first volley, not a single guerrilla was hurt. But in that volley, Frank Shepard, Hank Williams, and young Peyton were killed, and Richard Kinney mortally wounded. So they lost 4 men. Thomas Maxwell and Harrison Carter were also slightly wounded by the same volley. And 2 horses were killed, one under Dave Poole and the other under Harrison Trow. So Trow's horse went down. Shepard, a giant in size and brave as the best in a command where all are brave, fought the good fight and died in the harness. Hank Williams, this is no relation to the country singer Hank Williams. Hank Williams, only a short time before, had deserted from the Federals and joined Poole, giving rare evidences in his brief guerrilla career of great enterprise and consummate daring. Peyton Long was but a beardless boy from Howard County, who in his first battle, after becoming a guerrilla, was shot dead. We're going to find that the fortunes of war, as they call it, or the vicissitudes of war, are so strange that way. He's shot dead in his first battle, and yet we're going to meet, we'll talk more about John Cogar. He's been mentioned already in the series. Cogar was almost always nursing a bullet wound. He would collect 13 of them before the war was over, and he was in many desperate fights, and yet he never got a bullet wound that killed him. Okay, so and let's see. Mike's probably getting nervous. We're getting there 2 hours here. We don't have a lot more, Mike. Just hang in there. We might go 10, 15 over. Probably 60 of Johnson's command gained their horses before the fierce wave of the charge broke over them. They gained their horses. That means they were not on their horses. He had dismounted his men. The worst possible thing, I mean, it's like he committed suicide. Worst possible thing you can do is dismount mounted men in the face of a cavalry charge. That's how incompetent this man was. How he ever made major, it must have been politics. So, we got 60 made their horses and they're running, and they're pursued by 5 guerrillas. Ben Morrow, Frank James, Peyton Long, Arch Clements, and Harrison Trow. Of the 60, 52 were killed on the road from Centralia to Sturgeon. Todd drew up the command and watched the chase go on. In other words, he pulled up the major part of the command and let these 5 men chase them. For 3 miles, nothing obstructed the vision. Side by side over the level prairie, the 5 stretched away like the wind, gaining step by step and bound by bound upon the rearmost rider. Then little puffs of smoke rose. No sounds could be heard, but dashing ahead from the white spurts, terrified steeds ran riderless. Night in Sturgeon ended the killing. Night in the town of Sturgeon ended the killing. 5 men had shot down 52. Arch Clements, in proportion made afterwards, had credit to himself 14. Trow 10. Peyton Long 9. Ben Morrow 8. Frank James, besides killing Major Johnson and others in the charge upon the dismounted troopers, killed in the chase an additional 11. The only way they could have done this was to have had 6 pistols. Do the math. because they sure as heck didn't have time to reload. Johnston's loss was 291 out of 300. 291. Only 9 escaped. Okay, let's see. Let's go to picture 27. Picture 27. The Centralia Battle. I have enlarged the type so you can read it. And I have put red lines under what is false and yellow lines under what is true. One of the bloodiest battles of the war between the states, so on, so on. And it says that Johnston had only 120 newly recruited soldiers, and that is a bald-faced lie. He had 300. He had 3 companies. And he was engaged by 400 veteran guerrilla forces. See how they make it look like it wasn't our fault. It wasn't because we were inferior fighters and we were led by inferior officers. It's just that we were outnumbered almost 4-1. Baloney. They outnumbered the enemy. They got off 1 volley, and that's all. And they've got it wrong. Oh, I didn't catch that. Led by Captain William T. Bloody Bill Anderson. No, Todd led the troops, not Anderson. And the Federal soldiers were armed with single-shot infield muskets. That may be true. I thought it was false until I saw that Trow said they had muskets too. Now look at this that's yellow underlined. The guerrillas fought with Navy Colt revolvers, some having as many as 4 to 6 pistols each. That's right. If they had less than 6, it's because they were newer to the command and they had not yet had time to accumulate a full 6 off of the dead soldiers they were killing. And he talks about Johnston dismounted his men. That's true. Formed them into a single skirmish line. The guerrillas attacked the soldiers head on both flanks. The battle lasted 3 minutes. Almost every one of his men were killed and later mutilated by the guerrillas, meaning they were scalped. The guerrilla forces lost only 3 men during the battle. They actually lost 4. 1 month later, near Albany, Missouri, Bloody Bill Anderson was ambushed and killed by Federal troops using the same tactics to be used to battle Centralia. He wasn't. And I'm going to be interviewing one of his distant relatives named Jay Longley. He's got a phone situation we can't work with on the podcast. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to record him and play that interview for you in the next part. And he's going to give us the proof, and I will have pictures from his website to back it up, showing that Bloody Bill Anderson lived well into old age and may have even in his old age led a bandit gang. He lived on a farm just outside of Brownwood, Texas. Brownwood, Texas. Yeah. Okay. Let's wrap this up here. Let's see. History has chosen to call the ferocious killing of Centralia a butchery. In Civil War, encounters are not called butcheries where the combatants are man-to-man and where over either ranks there waves a black flag. This is true. Johnston's overthrow probably was a decree of fate. He rushed upon it as if impelled by some supernatural power. He did not know how to command, and his men did not know how to fight. Period. That's why the slaughter. He had, by the sheer force of circumstances, been brought face to face with 262 of the most terrible revolver fighters the American war or any other war ever produced. And he deliberately tied his hands by the very act of dismounting and stood in the shambles until he was shot down. Yeah, that's right. He did everything wrong. Everything wrong. And so the results were catastrophic. So let Major Johnston, long departed, resting in peace, we assume, let his example really sink down into you and get arrogance and pride out of your life. Don't let it be part of your decision making, whether it's your credit cards, whether it's where you live or where you work or what you do with your free time. Use your head and don't make decisions with your emotions. This is what happens when that's done. Catastrophic results eventually. If you get in the habit of doing that, as the Major was, there comes the day when it comes to a crushing halt, as it did for the Major. As he sums up the chapter, the guerrillas did unto the militia just what the militia would have done unto them if fate had reversed the decision and given to Johnson what it permitted to Todd. Okay, I think this is a good stopping point. I was hoping to get through one more chapter, but Mike's not worried about that. If we have to go into we're going to do part 6 for sure. If we have to go into part 7, then we'll do it. So I thank all of you for listening, for being with me, and those of you that will hear this later by recording. This is some of the most amazing history of our entire country in my book. And we're really not just learning history. We're getting a lot of good information that we can actually apply in our own lives, people. What you're learning here can make you into a wise person if you're not already. It can help make you into a wise person. I should qualify that. And if our military leaders would study this and see that the only concession they made to dealing with the guerrillas more effectively, they started letting their soldiers carry 2 pistols. And by the time you got into 63 and 64, the Army was now equipping itself with the 7-shot Spencers. They could fire 7 shots without reloading. They had been forced to use the single-shot carbines up until the first 2 years of this conflict. So that was a reason why the casualties were so terrible. But the point was, they should have fought fire with fire. They should have trained their men to be pistol fighters and to charge just like Quantrill did. They were so bound by the Army Book of Regulations for Cavalry, or some such thing, they could not adapt to circumstances. There is a great life lesson. If you've gotten your degree in college somewhere, don't let it package you to where you can't think out of the box. Take the good out of it, because a lot of the stuff you learn, a lot of philosophy and stuff you learned at college is useless and you'll never use it. It was a waste of time. And you had to pay good money to learn useless knowledge. So please, like I said, there's a lot of good in studying history that, my history teachers in school never taught me that. They didn't tell me that history was going to help me become wise and make my life easier, that by studying the mistakes and the successes of men in tense situations like warfare, that I could become a better decision maker. They didn't teach that to me. They taught me that you talk about dry history. Whoa. I couldn't wait to get out of history class. I thought I hated history. I thought. I was wrong. I hated the way it was taught. And that's why I refused to teach it like that. And I must be having a little success, because at least some of you like the way we're doing this. So anyway, Mike, ready to wrap it up?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, we have completed part 5 of Quantrill and his Raiders, and we're going to get into more about Bloody Bill Anderson, and we're going to, I don't know if we'll make it the next part or the part after that. We'll get into Quantrill's retreat out of Missouri into Kentucky and to the final battle where allegedly he was killed, and I'll set the record straight on that because Quantrill certainly was not killed during the Civil War. I'll even show you the man that took his place and said he was Quantrill. And he was wounded in the spine, and back in those days, that was a fatal wound, and he knew he was going to die anyway. And he saved his commander from further searching by claiming to be the wounded Quantrill. And but anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. That's all I had, though. There's some exciting stuff there. And Quantrill's history would go almost all the way into the 1900s. I think he died about 1896, if I remember correctly. But like I said, I'm just awed. You know, I learn every time I go through this. I learn more, and I see things I missed, and that's why studying history and going back over the material can really add to what you learned the first time through. Okay, Mike, I'm done.
All right. Another great show, Dorian. Good job. I really enjoyed listening tonight, and I think everybody... Oh, we're not done yet. You better get your treasure story ready, buddy.
Yeah, you know what? I was going to put that off on... I was going to put that off on Dennis, and he bailed out on me. Let me see.
Well, if you want, we can wait. It's fine. Bill.
Let me see, Bill.
Okay.
Bill, ask Bill if he's heard the story. Because see, I forget which ones I've told. I've told these stories in many places over the last 40, 50 years. Ask him if I've told the story about the Rattlesnake Dick mine.
I'm pretty sure you haven't.
Okay. All right. Well, there was a guy back in the last half of the 1800s named, I forget his full name. He went by the nickname of Rattlesnake Dick. And the history was a little vague about why, except that, the country up, I think it was up around Oregon, I believe, where he found a gold mine, was not in short supply when it came to rattlesnakes. Well, anyway, I forget how he died, but the mine was rich. He brought gold into town and all that really, really rich gold, wire gold and stuff that could be easily one man could mine. And nobody could find his mine. And it was lost, I guess, for about better part of 100 years. And then these two fairly young guys in their 20s went looking for it. And they found, back in a remote area, they found signs of a mine. And there was a shaft going in. And they followed it to a big vertical pit, maybe 25, 30 feet in diameter. And they thought that the mine, or the gold, was down in that pit. And so one of the guys lowered the other one down on a rope. They had some kind of a pulley set up or something. And just before he got to the bottom, the pit was 30 or 40 feet deep. And before he got to the bottom, he started screaming at the top of his lungs, screaming for his buddy to pull him up. And he pulled him up as fast as he could. And by the time he got his partner to the top of the pit and back on the cave or the shaft floor, his partner had gone insane, completely stark raving insane. And he got him out, got him to the hospital, and for one brief spell of a few minutes, he came out of his lunacy long enough to tell the doctors and his partner that he got within 4 feet of the floor, and the whole floor was covered with hundreds of rattlesnakes. He said the smell was terrible, and they all started rattling. And then he went back into his kind of a comatose, semi-comatose, zombie-like state. And they say, the last I heard, he'd never come out of it. So anyway, we now know why it was called the rattlesnake, why he was called Rattlesnake Dick. That pit was the protection of his gold, and the mine or the gold was beyond the pit. And he would have had boards or something hidden somewhere where he could get across the pit. He had some way to get maybe even another entrance into the mine. So as I understand it, the partner never went back to the mine and would not even tell anybody where it was because he didn't want them be responsible for them possibly getting killed by the rattlesnakes or something.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Well, that's one I'll never go after. I can guarantee you that much.
Yeah, I think I'll pass on that too.
No thanks.
Yeah.
You could put that on a map and guarantee gold, and I'm going to have to pass.
Yeah, it's just like a buddy of mine tried to get me to go to Ecuador back in the 70s. He was showing me gold nuggets that he'd panned out of the stream.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a little problem with that because in the jungle where the gold nuggets are, there are these little almost pygmy indigenous people that use blowguns with curare darts. You get hit with one of those and you're dead. It paralyzes your breathing muscles almost immediately. And on top of that, he came back from his second or third trip and he picked up some kind of a parasite that got in his left arm. And by the time the doctors finished cutting out his muscle in that arm to save his life, this stuff was eating him alive. He had a hole about half the size of a 12-pound cannonball in his bicep.
Oh, wow.
He was a big man, but he was still all enthusiastic about the gold. I said, I wish you well. You can have all the gold.
Right. Right.
So I never made it down to Ecuador.
Yeah,
but for all you brave souls out there, they tell me back in the jungles and around the waterfalls and the streams back there that there's a lot of gold, a lot of placer gold.
Yeah.
Best I can do tonight, Bill.
That's a good one, though. That's interesting. Very interesting. I think we need to, when we get time, maybe we divide some states and find some treasure stories. You know what I mean? And kind of split it up on states or regions, maybe. Wouldn't even have to be by state.
I'll tell you what, Mike.
But you've done real good at that. Because I know you've done Ohio and I mean you've done the Midwest and West and everywhere. So yeah, go ahead.
I'll tell you a little secret, but don't tell anybody now. This is just between you and me.
Yeah.
This guy wrote a book, and he did a book on every state in the Union, and he collected all the treasure stories he could find. It's called the Treasure Atlas. I forget, his name might be Thomas. I forget. I had a set, and I actually sold it. I had to get rid of some books and things when we were moving from Texas up here. But it's got ghost town sites and mine sites and treasure stories. It'll give you brief synopses of the treasure stories, and it'll show you on a map. It'll have a circle with a number in it to show you where the area where that story comes from. So it's called. Like I said, I think it's called the Treasure Atlas. Probably any of your big suppliers like Calico or somebody might, or anybody that supplies treasure books should have that still. I bet it's still in print.
Probably, yeah. Years ago. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I kind of cut you off.
I was just going to say, if it's not, you're going to have to look and see if you can find a used set. I think there's each book covers like 2 or 3 or 4 states, Mike. I think there's something like 12 books in the series, 10 or 12, I forget which. They're soft cover, but they're big. They're 8.5 by 11 books.
Nice.
A lot of pictures.
Now I forget what I was going to say. Never mind. Jeez.
Okay.
I'm horrible. I am beat. I am tired. I'm ready to get off here and
after all that fighting and riding.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
You got me thinking about snakes is the problem. You messed me all up. Now I'm just ready to get off here and go to bed. Snakes. Well, Dorian, let's call it a night, and
okay.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll come up with some other track. Maybe I can help out with that too. Come on. And Bill's got one. He's talking about He's talking about maybe sending to you.
Okay.
Oh, I know what I was going to tell you. Geesh. I remember years ago I had a little book, and it had treasure stories. I don't even know if I had it or if I just saw it. And there was one that really interested me, and I'd like to know more about was like conquistador armor found in Indiana in a field, supposedly.
Right.
Have you ever heard of that?
I have, yes.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. I'd love to know where that field was and check that out.
Yeah, Kenny Ray, W-R-A-Y, at Ray's Treasure Shop up in near Seymour, Indiana. Kenny probably has information on that if you want to look him up. He's on Facebook.
Really?
Anybody that wants to do that, yeah. But yes, there was some, and the conquistadores were much more traveled, as were a lot of other Europeans in this country than history gives them credit for. That's another area of history. See, we're not doing history revision. We're correcting history. We're putting it back. It's like restoring an old building to its former glory.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm trying to do with these presentations. Is I'm not trying to do revisionist history. I'm trying to undo the revisions of history that were done by the media. Anyway, there's not too far, Mike. Around the Ohio River, across from Ohio, is the little town of Augusta. And
in Ohio, you said?
No, I said right across from Ohio.
Oh, okay.
Between Maysville and Cincinnati, there's a little town of Augusta. It was actually captured by some of Morgan's men during the Civil War. They had a battle, fought in the streets of the town and in the houses.
Okay.
But anyway, before that, it was a huge Indian graveyard, and they say that nobody in Augusta can dig a new basement without finding Indian bones.
Wow.
No matter where they place their house. Some years ago, probably 10 to 15 years ago, somebody was actually grave digging looking for Indian artifacts, and they dug up a cache of Welsh gold coins.
Huh.
And, that is some really strong evidence, because it's those of us that have studied believe that a Welsh prince named Madoc brought people over here on ships, sailed up the Ohio River until he got to the Falls of the Ohio at Louisville, and actually built a stockade-type colony there.
Wow.
And he went back twice more to Wales and brought back people. So I would say that Madoc and his people were the source of those Welsh coins that were found in Augusta.
Oh, wow.
Now, the third trip, when he and his men got back, they found that the settlement had been burned, destroyed, and all the people were gone, Mike.
Wow. So
and
is that what they think the bones? Is that what you believe all the bones are? The people that were killed during that?
No. Those are Indian bones for sure. That's not Welsh. Augusta's a long way from the Falls of the Ohio.
Okay.
What I was going to tell you was, I thought you'd find this interesting. Up in the Northeast, there's a tribe of Indians called the Modocs.
Really?
Yeah, remember this was Prince Madoc, right?
Yeah, right.
What is very, very intriguing is that when you study the Modoc language, it has words of Welsh in it.
Oh, no kidding.
Yep. It looks like that when the colony was wiped out, some of the women were spared and the Indians took them back.
Oh,
And
wow.
and during the time that the white settlers were coming into Kentucky, the Indians would not live here because they believed that the spirits of what they called golden-haired, blue-eyed Indians haunted this land.
Oh, wow. That's
They
interesting.
would come in here and hunt, but they wanted to be back across the river by nightfall.
Wow. I knew
Yeah,
that. I knew
yeah,
Kentucky was sacred hunting ground, and they didn't live there.
yep,
Indians didn't inhabit it.
yep, absolutely. I'd like to do a series on Kentucky in the early years, and it's not just Kentucky. It would cover West Virginia and Ohio. Just go through all the early settlement. There are so many Indian battles and so many exciting things happened that
Yeah.
most
Yeah.
most of the kids in school never heard about any of these.
Right. Right. Very interesting. Early Ohio, Kentucky, and Midwest.
Hmm.
You could say. I mean, even Indiana with the Indian wars and stuff. There's a lot going on in Indiana, and very interesting. All right, let's call it a night. I am ready to relax, and I'm sure you're tired from all that.
You know
Excuse
what?
me,
I'm still going on adrenaline. It'll be about 15, 20 minutes after I shut down. Yeah.
There you go.
I'll get to the house and I'll say, "Whoa, I'm really tired."
All right, Dorian. Another
All right.
great job, buddy.
Thanks.
And it was awesome.
Appreciate
I sure enjoy this. I'm gonna be sad when it's over.
Yeah,
Good night,
well, you don't have to be because there's other good subjects we can get into.
I can't wait. Yeah.
All
Well, thank you,
right.
Dorian, and
Good night.
everybody, and thanks for
Good night,
tuning
everybody.
in. Yep.
Thanks
Good
for listening. Yep. Bye
Good
bye.
night.